Welcome to Kairos Research Center podcast. Christian faith seeking understanding, intellectual witness, and spiritual renewal.
Welcome to another edition of Kairos-podcast. Today we are beginning with a new series on books and culture. We are fortunate today to have with us David Tan, pastor of Hope EFC. He was also a partner of an advertising agency. Pastor Tan will kick off with two books by C.S. Lewis. This time around, he will be giving us a summary of the one of Lewis's most enigmatic, most profound book, The Abolition of Man. So take it away, David.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm very happy to be here. These two books by C.S. Lewis, The Abolition of Man and The Great Divorce, actually intrigued me very much when I first read them in my late 20s. And to this day, some words and images of this book have remained very vivid in my mind. In The Abolition of Man, Lewis wrote of men without chest. So he described them as those who laughed at honor and expressed shock to find traitors in their midst. You know, I've used this quote more than a few times when talking about the moral relativism of our day. And in The Great Divorce, Lewis wrote of a busload of very dreary ghosts going on a holiday from hell. And there the hell-bound beings are shadowy phantoms. They are in perpetual despair, while those in heaven were solid and very fully human, full of light, full of joy. Now, when I first read that, there was like a light bulb moment for me then. So today, in this presentation, I want to talk about the first book, which is The Abolition of Man, and we will cover The Great Divorce in the next episode. The Abolition of Man is actually quite a small book, 128 pages, and it began as a series of lectures, but don't mistake it for light reading, because it is actually quite a weighty subject that Lewis was engaging. So what is the book all about? I will talk about the book's theme, and then I'll go over Lewis's main arguments. In The Abolition of Man, Lewis was criticizing a textbook written for upper form students in England. He called it the Green Book. Lewis picked up on an example where its authors commented on a remark by a couple of tourists at the site of a magnificent waterfall. So this is where it all began, and I quote Lewis, "When the man said, 'This is sublime,' he was actually not making a remark about the waterfall, but a remark about his own feelings." End quote. And then the authors of this Green Book went on to say, "This confusion is continually present in language as we use it. We appear to be saying something very important about something, and actually we are saying something about our own feelings." End quote. So here's the issue. So does anything have any absolute value at all then? Or are our words simply expressions of personal truths or idle preferences? You know, the way we talk about ice cream flavor, I like this flavor, you like that flavor. You know, do our words actually mean anything? So the authors of the Green Book certainly thought values were appearances, in their own words. No more than your feelings, no more than my feelings. And this subversion of the notion of natural law or this universal moral code left Lewis very aghast. So what would society become if all our children were raised on this very skeptical spirit of the Green Book? This was Lewis's concern. You must remember that The Abolition of Man was subtitled Reflections on Education. So that is why Lewis was responding to this whole idea of education, the teaching of English in the upper forms, that actually subverted a very important aspect of all of our being and all of our life. If school children were fed on a diet of moral subjectivism, society will be flooded by, and C.S. Lewis calls them this, he calls them trousered apes. He calls them urban blockheads. Not very nice words, like, because trousered apes means monkeys wearing pants. Urban blockheads means educated people with bricks for brains, So that's Lewis wit for you. So by perpetuating this false philosophy, Lewis is saying that we are ripping out the very sentiment that makes us human. We silence the moral center that tells us what is right and what is wrong. So the tragic outcome would be a society populated by men and women without virtue or absence of any conviction of moral objectivity. And Lewis said this, quote, "We make men without chest and expect virtue of them." So this tragic comedy of pretend intellectuals who shred the meaning of honor and then they cry treachery, betrayal when they are betrayed. So looking around us today, we can't help but acknowledge how prescient Lewis was.
But the term "man without chest" is quite very popularly expounded.
Yes, yeah.
But it's so pointed, it's so memorable. What would you mean? Would that mean that an immoral person, or is it someone without virtue? What does a man without chest mean?
Yeah, actually, Lewis was really getting at something deeper, Michael. He was not referring to persons without virtues or persons without morals per se. In fact, he was saying that men without chest, men means men and women, men without chest, are very often moral, they are very often upstanding, but in their very own selective manner. Their moral standards may differ very broadly from yours and mine, or shift according to the mood of the times, but so what, it means your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth, so what, let's live together. And that is what Lewis is very concerned about, where you silence the whole idea that there is a universal moral code that means something. So this subjectivism makes men without chest, because their values are without any basis other than your personal feelings or pragmatism, or he refers to it as emotivism. So relativizing our intrinsic sense of right and wrong is rejecting the very existence of this natural law. In Lewis's own words, you are removing a person's vital organs, and then you expect these persons to function as a normal human being. And this is Lewis's concern, and he refutes this error and its fatal trajectory. So, after spelling out our human predicament, Lewis moved on to argue for the existence of natural law, or a fundamental universal moral code. First, things are right or just or beautiful or good, not because they receive our objective appraisal, but because they are. Reason demands it, reality affirms it, and this belief that some things are undeniably true and others false is built into the very fabric of all of human existence. Second, civilizations across the globe share this system of morality and virtue. They are standards of reality we consistently find in all peoples across time and distance. As an example, why is it a virtue for some people to die so that other people might live? Lewis asks in the book. If self-sacrifice were just a subjective or an irrational impulse, why teach it to our children? You must remember at this time, Britain was going through the Second World War. It's the tail end of the Second World War. And Churchill had called Hitler evil. He had called Hitler the mainspring of evil. So are these words true, or are they merely Churchill's own feelings or emotions or sentiments? And so clearly, sacrificing one's life in defense of our friends and loved ones, and even one's nation, is held up as a virtue all over the world, because society ought to be preserved, right? And also remember that during the Second World War, I think over 500,000 British soldiers and civilians died. So did they die for an idea, a feeling, or something that is necessary? So Lewis called this universal moral code the Tao. The Tao is absolute. It is fundamental to our value systems, and to reject it is to reject all grounds for value.
If I may intercede, David, I'm just curious, why the word Tao is a Chinese word, it's a Taoism thing, right? It's associated with that. So why did he use this word?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the same thing that occurred to me when I read the book too. You see, the Tao refers to the uncaused natural order of the universe, the flow, the way of harmony, and actually it predates Lao Tzu. He was born in 604 BC. It is thought that Lao Tzu systematized his philosophy as a way of living in harmony with the universal Tao. But Louis said, for want of a better word, Tao works well, because Tao is seen as the underlying first principles of life.
So it underwrites everything else.
Yes, in a way that's true. So I think that Louis also wanted to stress the idea that he's not coming up with something original. It's something that's very fundamental to the entire existence of all human history. The ancients like Plato and Aristotle, the philosophers across the globe, whether it's in India or China or the Hebrews. Well, these philosophers of the ancient world, they already understood, they accept the existence of an intrinsic natural law. And so Louis says, yeah, Tao works for me. And so he uses Tao as this, for want of a better word. And in fact, at the end of the book, Abolition of Man, he includes a very helpful appendix where various examples of ancient texts are cited to illustrate and to support this Tao. I don't read Chinese, but I understand that if you look at the Chinese language Bible, the Apostle John's Gospel, in the beginning was the Word, So that word, which we translate from the Greek logos, is actually Tao in the Chinese. So let me move on. So finally, in the last chapter, Louis took on critics who suggested that science and technology could well remake humanity and cultivate, let's say, an alternative basis for morality, maybe improve on the old one. Yes, sure, if you go on, soon we'll be saying brave new world, right? Yeah, so he argued against the lure of eugenics. Eugenics means the practice of genetic engineering and the misapplication of science as a kind of modern day Faustian bargain. You go there, that's exactly where Nazi Germany went, Louis is warning us. So he was not really against science, but he was against scientism, the idea that science was capable of explaining reality, all of reality, and to Louis that was objectionable. He called them scientific planners, he called them conditioners. These are Louis's own words. And people who insist on their own version of a subjective Tao, Louis warned, would unmake society, and eventually we will be plunged into a post-human world. Very scary words. So how could these conditioners presume to impose their artificial conception of good on earth by standing outside of the Tao? And this is what Louis wrote, and I quote, "They know how to produce good in us, but which conception of the good? Good cannot help them decide that, since it is up for grabs. A debarred judge cannot decide his own case." End quote. And Louis continued, "Stepping outside the Tao, they have stepped into the void, emptiness. Man's final conquest has proved to be the abolition of man." These are very strong words. And by now you might be wondering, is the abolition of man written as an apologetic of the Christian faith? Well, in a word, no. Because Louis himself explained that although he was a Christian, he wasn't really pushing Christian theism. He was really arguing for the validity of the Tao across all cultures. The reality is out there, not just for the Christian, not just in Judeo-Christian traditions. And you can say that this is where the brilliance of Louis and the book continues to appeal to such a wide readership throughout these years. I'm reminded of the Apostle Paul's words that the law is written on human hearts, right, in Romans chapter 2. And in fact, Augustine also concurred, who wrote the natural law in the hearts of man if not God? Isn't that true? Well, creation and natural law may point us to the glory of God, but apart from the revelation of Jesus, you could say they are incomplete witnesses. Therefore, before we can talk to postmoderns about Jesus, Francis Schaeffer once said that you really have to blow their roof off. You have to give their presuppositions a very good shaking, question their presupposition, question their logic. And I think to a large extent, this is what Louis is doing with the Abolition of Man. And someone has said that every story that has ever been told, whether in books or movies, they are really the story of the fall. The Abolition of Man points us to the destructive endpoint of humankind's estrangement from their Creator. So I wonder what Louis would say if he were alive today, you could say he saw it coming. He saw it coming. Some people might say, oh, our present existential crisis, this woke nihilism is a Western thing lah. We're in Malaysia, we're in Asia, it doesn't bother us. Oh, really? You really think so? I think that these effects is very corrosive, and these effects are just as real here. 80 years after the publication of the book, I think we see more clearly that whatever Lewis wrote about has been very prophetic. Meanwhile, the acid of subjectivism continues to eat away at our values, it eats away at our societies, our institutions. And if you're a Christian, and if you're keen to understand the laws of truth in our very troubling times, I believe The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis is a very good place to start. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for such a succinct and good summary of this. I hope the readers, the listeners will actually be encouraged to go on and actually read the book. Thank you very much.